See? I'd climb up there, but I'd have to go through the archaeological digs we got going on.
Might fall in a hole.
Might fall in a hole, or I might hit something real important. We had our kickoff yesterday. We had a little bit of rain. We had some kids. They had a good time. We had some really good music by 4 men. We enjoyed the fellowship. Huh? Hearts for One, they were called. We all know them. By most of their first names, we've known them for years, and we were glad to have them here. They really lift up God, and we really enjoyed having them. Announcements. Obviously, VBS starts tonight, 6 to 8. Anybody helping, be here by 4:15. It'll go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 6 to 8. Bring some kids. We need kids. Tuesday morning, 6:15 a.m. Men's Bible study if you're able to get up. Wednesday, we won't have no Wednesday Bible study. You can come and help with VBS though. Wednesday night. Do we have any other announcements? We have a birthday this week. Tuesday's Jerry's birthday. So we better sing happy birthday to Jerry. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jerry. Happy birthday to you. And yeah, amen to that. We're awful glad to have our visitors here. Good to have you here with us today. God is here. That's our most important visitor. That's the important thing. Well, let's go to reading the scripture. Stand down here and do it. We're in the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, verses 17 through 32. Please rise. This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the futility of their mind, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart, who being past feeling have given themselves over to lewdness, to work all uncleanness and greediness. But you have not so learned Christ, if indeed you have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus, that you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man which was created according to God, in true righteousness and holiness. Therefore, putting away lying, let each one of you speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil. Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need. Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. May God bless this reading. please remain standing. A couple more songs.
This in the white hymnal.
Well, you guys are turning the page to 546. I want to tell you that, okay. Last night, well, first of all, I was really happy at all the people that came yesterday, even though it was raining. And even though all my grandkids didn't make it, half of them made it. So, and then that you guys were able to just finish up for us so we could go to the funeral. That really made it good. So thank you so
You
much
guys
for
are
that.
always doing so much for us.
Yeah. So, I do have a little bit of a story to tell. So last night, after supper and after we rested a little bit, I came back to kind of pick up my Sunday school room with all the carnival games and stuff, but since it just rained, I thought, well, it'd be a good time to pull up some weeds. So I went out there last night, in our weed garden, and tried to pull some of those weeds, and I had taken probably like one load over there to the side of the road, and then turned around and got some more and started walking over there, and two sweet little lovebirds came running across the road, and I was just like, I just stood there and I was watching them, and I thought one was really sleek and smooth, and the other one looked soft and fluffy and had a fluffy white tail, and they came over and they ran across and they went into our bushes and stuff, but one of them stopped right there for a minute and was the little fluffy-tailed one and was looking around and smelling, and then went into the bushes with the other one. And I thought of you guys, and I thought how, they're probably supporting each other. They're like you guys do with us. Since John's become the interim pastor, you guys have been so supportive, and we appreciate that. And just maybe warning each other of danger and stuff, and maybe that's why that one stopped. But the funny thing is, I stopped because they didn't just have a white tail. Their white tail went into black. It was two little skunks. So that was danger to me. So I thought, I don't know if I should leave, if I should just stand here, what should I do? So it was like standing there, sniffing the air, looking around. I don't even know if it saw me because I was just standing really still. And it went into the bushes, and I thought, I think I've pulled enough weeds for tonight. I better go in and clean up the Sunday school room, So, but we just, yeah, we just appreciate you guys and how you guys support us. So I tried to put that little story into that. Let's sing "Love Lifted Me." I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe am I. Love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me, love lifted me. Love lifted me, nothing else could help. Love lifted me. All my heart to Him I give, ever to Him I'll cling. In His blessed presence live, ever His praises sing. Love so mighty and so true merits my soul's best song. Faithful, loving service due to Him belongs. Love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love 6, tell the good news. Isn't it great that God's there to lift us up? Like when we're sad, when we're grieving, when we're struggling, and he can help us when we can't climb those mountains, can he? Like the other song said. Okay, hang on, I gotta get it for a minute. I don't read music for you visitors. I'm just trying to remember. Christ was born in a distant land. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Lived on earth for the good of man. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news that Christ has come. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news to everyone. Christ became a man on earth. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Gave his life for man's rebirth. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news that Christ has come. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news to everyone. Christ arose and to heaven went. Tell the good news, tell the good news. All may follow who repent. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news that Christ has come. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news to everyone. Christ still lives in the world today. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Giving strength to all souls who pray. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news that Christ has come. Tell the good news, tell the good news. Tell the good news to everyone. Aren't you glad we get to tell the good news this week? Amen.
Good morning. Glad to see visitors here with us today. Yeah. This week, Vacation Bible School, kids and kickoff yesterday afternoon. And I was trying to prepare a sermon which was inspired by something that David Jeremiah spoke on recently. He talked about how he was giving a sermon on cancel culture and talking about how God doesn't operate that way. And so that kind of inspired my way of thinking. I looked at some articles and thought, we should really talk more about that in church. I was looking at an article recently about some guy in Spain. He was some sort of an official figure, so he is expected to watch what he says. And unfortunately, he posted online somewhere where other people could see it. He said that only women can become pregnant. He said because only women have the right parts to do that. And that seems very obvious to us, but it's not obvious or acceptable in today's culture, and they quickly canceled him. A lot of people got very, very angry at him. He lost his job over this. Wouldn't it seem kind of obvious that that's a biological fact? Well, you can't say these things anymore. There's a lot of things. There's a long list of things that you just can't say or you get canceled. So I'm not going to go through a list of many articles that I've read on this subject. I wanted to go back to the 1st century AD and talk about how Jesus and his disciples dealt with people who should be canceled. 1st century Israel was full of them, don't you know? There was a lot of people around that were unclean or unrighteous or just despised for one reason or another. And there was a lot of people that were ready to jump on that and cancel them. And as I look at the way that Jesus and his disciples dealt with these very people and the way they taught us to deal with them, I think there's a great lesson that we can learn today with the things that we have to deal with now. So I was kind of occupied with Vacation Bible School yesterday and didn't get very far down the road of preparing for the sermon, but I got here today and Monica just told me to just wing it. So that's what I'm going to do. Figured I'd start with Philippians chapter 4. Yeah, because I just like it. I know the reading was Ephesians chapter 4, but we've moved on. I'm going to Philippians 4. I want to read verses 8 and 9. What? Are you canceling me already? I'm just getting started. Verses 8 and 9 of Philippians 4 is a good one to memorize, to keep handy when society around you is taking a turn for the worse. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. What is the key to peace? Sometimes you got to turn off the news and stop focusing on all that negative stuff, right? Sometimes it's important to focus on what is true and noble, just, pure, lovely. Focus on the good things. Fill your mind and your heart with good things, because there's still good stuff around, isn't there? There's still good fellowship to be had among us here. There's a lot of good in the world. There's a lot of beauty in the world still. Let's focus on what God has given us that is good. If you fill your mind with the garbage is going to be coming out of you. We're told to fill our minds and our hearts, our thoughts, our day-to-day lives with good stuff. And then the God of peace will be with you. In other words, you can find peace within yourself. You don't have to find peace in the discord that's taking place all around us. Discord is easy enough to find. So what is the most true thing, the most true person, the most lovely person, the most righteous, the one who is of good report in all of history? Would be Jesus. Wouldn't it be good if Jesus was the great distraction from life rather than the other way around? As we try to live our lives for Jesus, are you distracted by life? Or do you go through life being distracted by Jesus? That would be good, no matter what you encounter, to be distracted, so distracted by Jesus and what he is telling you, that the things of this world take second place. Well, let's look at how he and some others that are close to him dealt with the people in this first century that they encountered that everybody else was canceling. Let's look at lepers, first of all. Did Jesus encounter lepers?
Yes.
Yeah. More than one occasion. I want to look at Luke 17 for starters. these are people that were feared, they're unclean, and they might be contagious, so keep them far out of town, make them wear, particular clothes so that we'll know who they are from a distance so that we can avoid them, so we don't have to get, within breathing distance of them. If they had those little blue masks, they would have made them wear masks everywhere, wouldn't they? These lepers, in Luke 17, starting in verse 11, says, "Now as it happened as he went to Jerusalem, that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. And then as he entered a certain village," the village, you see, remains nameless here, "there met him 10 men who were lepers, who stood afar off." Why are they standing far off? Yeah, they're used to other people's reactions. They know what is likely to happen if you approach somebody. You get rocks thrown at you and insults and all kinds of things. So they stood far off. This is just what they always do. It's their habit. And they lifted up their voices. So they're hollering at him. They said, "Master, have mercy on us." And so when he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And so it was that as they went, they were cleansed. So in obedience, he didn't say, "Okay, you're cleansed right now." He said, "Go and show yourselves to the priest." As they turned and they followed in obedience what he told them to do, they were cleansed on the way. So the obedience is there, but notice that the gratitude is not there with all of them. Verse 15, "One of them, when he saw that he was healed, returned, and with a loud voice glorified God, and fell down on his face at his feet, giving him thanks." Samaritan. So Luke thought it very important to add that footnote on there. The one guy who returned to give thanks, they all expressed obedience. One also gives thanks. He is a Samaritan. And Jesus answered and said, "Were there not 10 cleansed? But where are the 9? Well, they're still on their way to the priest, right? They're going to go get checked up so that they can go back into society. Jesus says, "Were there not any found who returned to give glory to God except this foreigner?" And he said to him, "Arise, go your way. Your faith has made you well." Lepers, uncanceled. Jesus meets with them. He lets this guy fall at his feet. There is no sense here that Jesus is kicking him off, turning him away. He speaks to them, he interacts with them, and he cleanses them. Jesus is not going to give into the cancel culture that says, just push them off somewhere else where they can die, because we don't want to deal with them. Jesus uncancels them. Second group, everybody despises tax collectors. We still kind of despise them today, don't we? Look in Luke chapter 19. I'm going to start in verse 1. "Then Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. Now behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich." And I'm also told that he was a wee little man. "And he sought to see," now behold, I already got there. "And he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was of short stature. So he ran ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said to him, 'Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house.' So he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. But when they saw it, they all complained." Who's they? Cancel culture is kicking in, right? We don't deal with those kind of people. They're collaborators with the Romans. They cheat us. This guy has become rich through, obviously, dirty dealings with the Romans. We don't like tax collectors. They are just about bottom rung of this society. But Jesus is going to not only talk to him and call him down so he can speak with him, he's going to his house. So they said, "He has gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner." Well, okay. Tax collector, sinner. I can see where they make that comparison, but that's not necessarily the fact, is it? Verse 8, then Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, look, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor, and if I have taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore fourfold. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. Tax collectors too, right? Tax collectors, uncanceled. The third one, let's look at Samaritans. We've already seen one Samaritan who was a leper, but let's look at more in Luke chapter 10. I'm going to start with verse 25. This is a Samaritan in a story which Jesus tells to make a point. Luke chapter 10, starting with 25. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, what is written in the law? What is your reading of it? So he answered and said, this is a typical rabbinical teaching. They all knew this one. He's just speaking it by rote. He says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have answered rightly. Do this and you will live. Okay? Not a whole 10 commandments. We'll just boil it down. Just do this and you will live. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, and who is my neighbor? You got a good answer. Why don't you just quit? But he still wants to test him. So Jesus answered and said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a certain priest came down that road. And when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Right? Likewise, a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked and passed by on the other side. What do we know about priests and Levites? They're supposed to be holy. They're supposed to work in the temple. This guy might be dead for all we know. He's bleeding. He's naked. He's laying there still. If I touch him, I'm unclean for quite a while. I can't do my job. So there is religious stuff going along here in this story. But in verse 33, a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, we know about they're bad people. They're half Jewish. They're a bad mixture of foreigners and Jews. That goes back to the time of the Assyrian deportation, where they took a bunch of the Jews away and brought a bunch of foreigners in, let them all mix together. This is an abomination. They weren't supposed to do that. And they were also worshiping these golden calves up north rather than acknowledging the temple in Jerusalem. So there's serious problems with Samaritans. But a certain Samaritan came along, and he saw this guy, and he had compassion. The two guys that are supposed to be holy and righteous and religious and know God's will, let's get on the other side of this road. The Samaritan, who is supposed to be a bad person, he's supposed to be everything that they despise, he sees this and has compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them, and he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the next day when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I'll repay you. So he's out his time, he's out money. He took a risk. He might have been touching a dead man and become unclean. But a Samaritan doesn't have that much to lose, does he? Compared to a priest and a Levite. He is willing to give what he has. So Jesus asks the lawyer who is testing him, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? There's your answer. It's a long answer. He could have just given you a definition, what is neighbor. But Jesus told him a story, and he said, now you tell me what a neighbor is. The guy said, well, the one who showed mercy on him. And that one was a Samaritan. Very clear from Jesus' story, Samaritans are now uncanceled. And we are to treat them the same. Number 4, women. Women in a lot of cultures are looked down on. We were talking about this a little bit in Sunday school today, but the women in first century Israel had it better probably than many other women around the world. Jewish law gave them a lot of protections. There were a lot of freedoms that they had. Remember Proverbs 31. You know, she goes out and she establishes her own business. They had a voice in public, which a lot of other people in other cultures don't do. And they had a better status, yet there were problems. Even in a good, holy, God-honoring society, there are still some latent tensions, shall we say, between men and women, right? And so a man alone encountering a woman alone is likely to be concerned about his reputation. People see us out here together, they're going to wonder what's going on. And so let's look at the woman that Jesus encountered out in the middle of nowhere in John chapter 4. Even today, we have to be a little bit cautious about some of these things. I was trained to be a teacher many years ago. I'm still a certified teacher in Illinois. And I remember going to a high school where I did my student teaching. And the guy who I was training under, he said, whatever you do, be careful not to get it caught alone with anybody. If a student comes in the room with you and you're alone, you make sure that door stays open. In fact, it's better to take them out in the hall to talk to them. You don't ever want to be found alone with somebody. And the same things are told to us as church leaders. Long before I was a pastor, I was a deacon, and I was told, you know, don't get caught alone with a single woman someplace because you can get accused of something. So when you ordain a man to be a pastor in your church, you're basically also ordaining his wife, aren't you? There are many things that I cannot do without my wife. I cannot be sent to a single woman's home to minister to her in private. I would have to take my wife with me, right? So here we have in John chapter 4, Jesus is walking along. Let's see. I'm going to start in verse 5. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well, and it was about the 6th hour. 6th hour is midday. It's hot. This is not when most people come to the well, and yet it's when a certain person did choose to come to the well, probably because she didn't want to meet with a bunch of other people. A woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." Now, for us in 20th century America, that sounds like a reasonable request, right? She has come to that well to draw water. She has all the implements to do it. Jesus is a traveler from a distance. He doesn't have a pitcher and buckets and rope or whatever you need to get water out of that well. And here she comes, so he says, "Give me a drink." Did she give him a drink? I don't see that in the story. Do you? If you keep going down through this story, I'm not sure if she ever does. But let's go back to verse 8. For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy the food, and the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." why are you talking to me, a Samaritan woman? She doesn't say, here, okay, no problem, I'll give you something to drink. She asks him a question. Why are you talking to me? Two things there. I'm a Samaritan and I'm a woman. Probably woman is the bigger problem because they're alone. And when the disciples show up later, they're going to be scandalized when they see him talking to her alone. But she's also a Samaritan. So again, we've mentioned that before. But Samaritans, remember, if you go back to Nehemiah chapter 4, do you remember when the exiles from Babylon came back and they had to work on the wall with their tools in one hand and weapons with another? Why was that? Because the Samaritans were outside the walls. The Samaritans were already in place hundreds of years before this, and as the Jews in Jerusalem were trying to rebuild, the Samaritans came down and tried to attack them. So they were in fear for their lives as they were trying to rebuild their lives. This animosity between Jews and Samaritans goes way, way, way back. So she says, I'm a Samaritan and I'm also a Jew. Why are you talking to me? And Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Okay? In other words, things are changing. I come to change this whole world. If you knew who I was, then your proper response should have said, give me living water. That's a easy price to pay, right? A little water from the well for living water. And Jesus is giving her the words of life. He is speaking to her. This is the Messiah of the world. The woman said to him, Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? She's not on the same page with him yet. Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? Jesus answered and said to her, Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water, springing up into everlasting life. And the woman said to him, Sir, give me this water, that I may not thirst nor come here to draw. She's kind of getting it, but she's still not on the same page, is she? Jesus said to her, Go and call your husband and come here. There is a third reason why he should not be talking to her. And I'm a woman. But there's a third reason, and Jesus wants to point it out. She needs to really, really open her eyes and see who he is. And what does she know after he says this? She says, I have no husband. He said, You have well said, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands. The one whom you now have is not your husband. In that you spoke truly. You've been married and married and married and married and married, and now you're living with somebody you're not even married with. Now she knows who he is, right? Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Well, she kind of knows who he is. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. She's bringing out the distinction between Jews and Samaritans, right? She's emphasizing that again. She found out that he's a prophet, so now she wants to get a detailed answer to something that has been bothering her people for hundreds of years. But Jesus said to her, Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. The hour is coming. That's what we should know when Jesus encounters people. An hour is coming. And verse 25, I'm skipping down a little bit. She says, The woman said to him, I know Christ, and when he comes, he will tell us all things. I who speak to you am he. Now I go down to verse 28. It says, The woman then left her water pot, went her way into the city, and said to the men, Come and see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ? I only point that out to tell you that I still don't see any place in here where she actually gave him a drink. Do you? They're having a fairly long conversation. This is one of the longest recorded conversations between two people in the Gospels. And yet, where it began was he just wanted water, right? Doesn't seem like he ever got the water, but when she left, it said she left her water pot and ran off. She was so excited that she forgot all about water, didn't she? But the disciples had come, and they were wondering, in verse 27, that he's talking with a woman. They were kind of disturbed at that. They haven't got the memo yet. Jesus is pouring out a new revelation to people. I'm here to uncancel them. And yet the disciples come along and they're just wondering, why is he talking to a woman? She ran off and left the water pot, so now at least he has enough to get his own water, I guess. Women are uncanceled. Let's go on to the next one, Roman soldiers. I want to go to Luke chapter 3. Do you think that the Jews might have had some issues with Roman soldiers? Going around crucifying people all over the place? That's kind of a problem. This is not Jesus speaking in Luke chapter 3. This is John the Baptist. So it's kind of a forerunner of things that are to come. Luke chapter 3, verse 14. A lot of people came to John and they're asking him, what kind of things should I do in order to be saved? And he's giving them pointers. There is tax collectors were coming. We've already talked about them. He tells them, collect no more than what is appointed for you. A lot of people are asking him stuff, but soldiers in verse 14 asked him, what shall we do? Does that strike you as strange? If these are the occupying Roman soldiers, they're coming down to see what this Jew is doing in the Jordan River, baptizing people, and they're going to ask him for advice. They may have been sent there to keep the peace, because whenever large crowds gather, the rulers get uneasy, don't they? So they might have sent soldiers there to watch over what is happening down at this river. But while they're there, guarding their post, keeping an eye on all the people, they can't help but hear what's going on, right? And at some point, the soldiers actually went up to John the Baptist and asked him questions. They're starting to feel this, aren't they? The soldiers said to them, do not intimidate anyone or accuse falsely, and be content with your wages. John the Baptist, the Elijah who was to come and prepare the way. He is preparing the way for Jesus, the great uncanceller, and he is speaking to tax collectors and now soldiers. All of the people that these good Jews around him that came to listen probably would not have talked to. You don't talk to the soldiers because bad things can happen when you do that. Let me go over to Matthew chapter 5. This is Jesus speaking. This is the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5, verse 40 and 41. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go with him 1 mile, go with him 2. He's speaking to a Jewish audience here. Who would compel them to go with them for 1 mile? Soldiers. Soldiers marching all over the countryside. They got big, heavy packs to carry, shields, weapons, things like that. They're allowed to put this on a citizen. Just grab somebody off the side of the road and say, you carry my pack for a while. They're allowed to do that for 1 mile. But Jesus says, if soldiers compel you, you have to go with them according to the law for a certain distance, right? And then you go with them another distance to show them the love of Christ. if you do exactly what the law tells you to do and what the soldiers are forcing you to do, are you better than anybody else for that? No, that's compulsion. But when you do it of your own free will, to show them that I have love for you and I'm going to carry this pack for you a little bit farther, now you've become a witness to them. So John the Baptist and Jesus are in the business of uncanceling Roman soldiers. Matthew chapter 8. I want to look at a centurion. Matthew 8, starting in verse 1. When he had come down from the mountain, the centurion doesn't show up in verse 1, but a leper does. I want to go ahead and start with verse 1 because this kind of reiterates that we said about lepers. Great multitudes followed him, and behold, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Then Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. When did Jesus touch him? After he was cleansed or before? Right. So this leper came close enough, defying all the conventions of the time, that he could speak to him in a normal voice. And Jesus accepted that, and he moved closer to the leper and reached out and touched him. We've already talked a little bit about lepers, but if we go down to verse 5, now we'll see another Roman soldier. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him, saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, dreadfully tormented. And Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. The centurion answered, come under my roof, but only speak a word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, having soldiers under me, and I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to those who followed, assuredly I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. And I say to you that many will come from east and west, that's us, Gentiles, from east and west, and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And he said to the centurion, go your way, and as you have believed, so let it be done for you. And his servant was healed that same hour. But prior to him doing this, for a Jew, especially a teaching Jew, a rabbi, a man of God, to go into a Gentile's house, he would be unclean because of that, wouldn't he? But when the centurion comes to him, he says, I will come. Again, we see the soldiers uncanceled. Let me move on. I've got 4 more to go. Let's talk about the dregs of society, the really bad sinners, okay? Did Jesus uncancel sinners? He went and visited with them, talked with them. The Pharisees had a problem with that. He's sitting with tax collectors and sinners, didn't he? John chapter 8. Starting in verse 2. Now early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. And then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Doesn't it take 2 to tango? Where's the guy? Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? This they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear. So here we have a Again, there's the issue with women, right? The woman at the well was kind of concerned when she saw a lone man coming up to the well in Samaria. Jesus should have been concerned about his reputation, but she could have been more concerned about her life. Because when a man and a woman are found in adultery, who's the one who's most likely to get dragged out into the street and beaten or stoned or called names? Yeah. So Jesus approached her and put her at ease about that, but here a woman is already caught, and she is the only one who has been dragged out. And they are testing him, but he stoops down and he writes on the ground with his finger. What do you think he's writing? Names? Sins of these past people? This reminds me of a passage in the Old Testament. I think it's in Jeremiah, isn't it? Where Jeremiah speaks of an evil people. They will be written in the dust. So when they continued asking him, he raised himself and said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first." And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. This woman doesn't have a plea for her innocence. She was caught. She knows that she is guilty. They all know she's guilty, and so does Jesus. But what does Jesus do with the dregs of society? The people that we want to cancel, put down, even kill, if that's what it takes to silence them, he uncancels them. Sinners uncanceled. What about rich people? Let's go to Matthew 27. I think you're kind of getting the gist of it by now, right? Getting a little bit repetitive? Well, I've only got 2 more to go. Maybe 3. Rich people in Matthew 27, 57 to 60. This is a long chapter. This is after Jesus had died on the cross. In verse 57, now when evening had come, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself had also become a disciple of Jesus. And this man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus, and then Pilate commanded the body to be given to him. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. Well, he probably hired people to hew it out of the rock. And he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and departed. Who is Joseph, and why is he doing this for Jesus' body? He's a rich man, and he's doing it because he is one of Jesus' followers. Did Jesus turn away rich people? No. One of them he told, before you can come, you have to go and sell all that you have and give it to the poor. Because that guy had an issue. But Joseph was never told that, was he? We know that rich people did follow Jesus, and they were still rich. Remember Nicodemus? He was a rich and important person, and that's all of John chapter 3. He came to Jesus in the middle of the night, didn't he? Did Jesus turn him away and say, I don't talk to people like you. You're too rich. I'm only here for the poor people and the dispossessed. No, he talked with rich people too. He talked with rulers, all the way down to the dregs of society. Rich people as well are uncanceled. I'm going to take a little time here because I got another one written down, Luke 7. Luke chapter 7, starting in verse 36. You will see a rich person here, and you will see a woman here. Both of them having close encounters with Jesus, but with very, very different results. Then one of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him, and he went into the Pharisee's house. He's willing to eat with these guys too. And he sat down to eat, and behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner, okay, talked about them before, when she knew that Jesus sat at the table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of fragrant oil and stood at his feet behind him, weeping. And she began to wash his feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair of her head. If that sounds strange to you, she stood at his feet, but she was behind him. That's because they don't have chairs like we do back in this time. They recline at the table. They will have their heads towards the table, and they'll be laying backwards, so his feet would be behind him. So she is standing behind him and washing his feet with her tears, wiping them with her hair. She kissed his feet and anointed them with the fragrant oil. That's a nice picture, right? There's nothing scandalous going on here, is there? Lots of people around. We know that there's nothing going to happen. But the Pharisee that invited him into his house, he's got an issue with it. He just doesn't even like her touching him. But he doesn't say anything about it. So how is it that she is able to come into this guy's house? You think she's been there before? He did not kick her out. He did not say anything to her. He did not say anything to Jesus. He just sat there and watched. And all of this is going on in his head. He spoke to himself, saying, this man, if he were a prophet, he would know who and what manner of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. How does he know she's a sinner? He's had personal evidence of that, possibly. And Jesus answered and said to him, you know, you don't have to speak out loud for Jesus to answer you, do you? He said, Simon, I have something to say to you. So he said, teacher, say it. There was a certain creditor who had two debtors, and you already know who those two debtors are, right? There's two sinners in this place. There's the Pharisee and there's the woman. He's only pointing out the woman who's a sinner, but isn't he himself a sinner? There was a certain creditor who had two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they had nothing with which to repay, he freely forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him more? And Simon answered and said, I suppose the one whom he forgave more. And he said, you have rightly judged. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she has washed my feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair of her head. You gave me no kiss, but this woman has not ceased to kiss my feet since the time I came in. You did not anoint my head with oil, but this woman has anointed my feet with fragrant oil. Therefore I say to you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loves little. And then he said to her, your sins are forgiven. I wish there was more to that story. I think Simon's coming to a realization at that point, isn't he? Wait a minute, you're talking about somebody else here, aren't you? Are you saying that I love God little because I had little forgiven? Yeah, it's exactly what he was saying. So, uncanceling the woman who came with love and gratitude and a desire to be forgiven of her many sins, she never denied it, did she? But the rich man, in this case, he held back. He is not trying to be forgiven. He is not trying to approach God. It's not every rich man who becomes a follower of Jesus. Some of them encounter him, and they go their own way, and they still try to do the same old thing. Ordinary people, Luke chapter 19. I'm going to try to speed up a little bit before somebody over there starts throwing things at me. Verses 29 to 40. Well, maybe I won't do the whole, that's a long section. Luke chapter 19. It came to pass when he drew near to Bethphage and Bethany at the mountain called Olives that he sent two of his disciples, saying, go into the village opposite you, where you will find a colt tied on which no one has ever sat. Loose it and bring it here. And if anyone asks you, why are you loosing it? Then you say, because the Lord has need of it. Now we know that he is following in Solomon's footsteps there, who rode a donkey to his own coronation. Jesus is going to come in his triumphal entry as the Messiah into Jerusalem. He's going to be riding a donkey. He's going to come with humility. So I'm going to skip down a little bit. They brought the donkey to Jesus. In verse 35, they threw their clothes on the colt, and they set Jesus on him. And as he went, many spread their clothes on the road. And then, as he was now drawing near the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works they had seen, saying, Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Praise in heaven, glory in the highest. And some of the Pharisees called to him from the crowd, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. But he answered and said to them, I tell you that if these should keep silent, the stones would immediately cry out. These are the common people. Many, many common people coming out to meet Jesus. There may be sinners mixed in with them. There may be tax collectors. There might even be soldiers, rich and poor alike, but they are the common people. And when the common people throw their clothes on the ground for him to walk on, when the common people call out praise to God because the king is coming, the Pharisees don't like it, and they want them canceled. We want you to cancel this whole crowd, right? And Jesus says, not doing it. I tell you, if they keep silent, the stones will cry out. Common people, ordinary people, coming to Jesus, immediately uncanceled. And finally, thieves. Did Jesus uncancel thieves? Look at Luke chapter 23. From the cross. Luke 23, verse 38. An inscription also was written over him in letters of Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, saying, This is the King of the Jews. And then one of the criminals who were hanged blasphemed him, saying, If you are the Christ, save yourself and us. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Do you not even fear God, seeing that you are under the same condemnation? And we justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. And he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, Assuredly, I say to you, today, one thief uncanceled. One thief not, because he didn't ask for it. The disciples continued this later on. We have 9. Oh, got them all up there, right? 9 groups of people uncanceled. One of them foreigners. 2 of them foreigners, if you count the soldiers. Samaritans, Romans, all of them uncanceled and allowed to come to God, because God is not in the business of humiliation, is he? He might chastise if need be, but his purpose in that is to restore you, to lift you up, and to strengthen you. The disciples continued on with this. Acts chapter 11, I believe that's the story of Peter. Let's see. Peter was up on the roof, and he's relating this story to people later. He said, I was in the city of Joppa praying, and in a trance I saw an object descending like a great sheet, and it came to me, and I saw 4-footed animals of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and birds of the air, and I heard a voice saying to me, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But I said, Not so, Lord, for nothing common or unclean. Nothing common or unclean. Is this about animals? No, it's about people. Nothing common or unclean has at any time entered my mouth. But the voice answered me again from heaven, And it said, what God has cleansed, you must not call common. When God uncancels something, you don't cancel it ever again. And at the same time, Gentiles came to his door. So Peter understood that this was talking about foreigners. And finally, he gets the memo, doesn't he? He says, we are to deal with all Gentiles as well. Acts chapter 8. Philip had already gotten the memo. These are the same people that came up and were scandalized when they found Jesus talking to a foreign woman out at a well. Philip and Peter were among them. But in Acts chapter 8, let's just look at 26. An angel of the Lord spoke to Philip, saying, arise and go towards the south along the road which goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. And who did he encounter there? A eunuch from Africa, didn't he? He was a eunuch from the Ethiopians. Verse 27. He was under Candace, the queen of the Ethiopians. He was sitting in a chariot, and in verse 29, the Spirit said to Philip, go near and overtake this chariot. I guess it wasn't going very fast. So Philip ran up to him, heard him reading Isaiah, and said, do you understand what you are reading? He ended up having a long Bible study with this guy, taking him down and baptizing him there in the desert. This guy is an Ethiopian and foreigners. A foreigner is also uncanceled. Philip and Peter have gotten the memo. If you are sons and daughters of your Father, are you doing as he would have you do to others around you? Probably not if you are nearly half of Americans. David Jeremiah, I mentioned he had given a sermon recently that inspired this one. And he had mentioned a statistic which might be troubling to you. 47% of Americans claim that they have not made one new friend in the last 5 years. They will not approach people. In fact, a lot of Americans today refuse to. I've also seen studies where they say a lot of the people on the left have answered questions and said, we are unwilling to have any sort of relationship with anybody who's called a conservative. A lot of us are so divided that we will not even speak to each other. So we could speak more of what God has done, but we are out of time. We could speak of Gideon being uncanceled in Judges chapter 6, Rahab in Joshua chapter 6, but you get the idea, right? If you are sons and daughters of your Father, go out and do the same. Go and uncancel somebody today. And let's have an invitation. You have a song for us? Number 308 in the white hymnal.
Yeah.
I forgot to change that one.
Told you goodbye.
So it's 308. Pass me not, O gentle Savior. Pass me not, O gentle Savior. Hear my humble cry. While on others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry.
not going to ask